"What the hell do you think you're doing, touching my daughter's throat?" His voice boomed down the hallway like a thunderclap. Maya William froze mid-motion, her hand still hovering just an inch away from the small child's delicate neck. Chloe Sterling stood still, wide-eyed and unmoving, her little fingers clutching the edge of her floral dress. Maya had only meant to help. The 5-year-old had been sitting on the floor near the foyer, both hands pressed against her throat, her face pale and breath shallow. To Maya, who had once watched her own nephew suffocate during a childhood seizure, it was a reflex: get close, check the airways, help. But in that moment, all Richard Sterling saw was a stranger, a housemaid, a woman he barely remembered hiring, daring to place a hand on the most fragile piece of his life. He stormed toward her, fists clenched. "Get away from her." Maya backed away slowly, hands raised in the universal sign of peace. "Sir." She looked like she couldn't breathe. "I wasn't trying to." "I didn't ask for an explanation," he snapped, eyes narrowing with fury. "You work for me. You clean. You don't touch my daughter, ever." Maya stepped back slowly. "Sir." She looked like she... Before she could finish, he was in front of her. And then, crack. His hand slammed across her cheek with brutal force. The sting was instant, sharp. Her knees buckled. She hit the floor, the edge of the marble planter slicing open her lower lip. Chloe blinked. No tears, no screams, just stillness. "You filthy little manipulator," Richard hissed. "You think because you wear a clean apron, you're suddenly qualified to diagnose my child? You think I'd ever trust you with her?" Blood welled at the corner of Maya's mouth. She tasted iron. She wanted to speak, to explain, but the fury in his eyes told her it didn't matter. "She wasn't breathing right. I thought she might." "She has a condition," he cut her off. "She's not dying. She's just mute. And she sure as hell doesn't need some basement-level staff pawing at her like a science project." He turned, scooping Chloe into his arms. The girl clutched her teddy bear but didn't resist. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you away from this mistake." "Do." Maya sat trembling on the floor as they disappeared down the hallway. The bruises bloomed quietly over the next few hours, one on her cheekbone, another on her pride. Mr. Denholm, the head of staff, said nothing about the mark when he reassigned her to the laundry quarters. Just looked at her with a mix of pity and warning. Then handed her a stack of guest towels to fold. Down in the basement, the hum of washing machines became her only company. She bit the inside of her cheek to distract herself from the throbbing pain. "You're lucky you weren't fired," she thought. Or worse. But even through the sting, she remembered the child's face. Chloe, the way her little fingers clutched her throat. That wasn't just mutism. That was panic. And something else. Something Maya had seen before in her nephew's eyes, days before his final episode. 2 days later, Maya was crouched beside a rolling hamper when she heard soft steps down the corridor. Chloe, again, barefoot, holding her teddy bear, eyes locked on Maya. Maya didn't move. "I'm not supposed to talk to you," she whispered, not expecting a reply. The girl walked forward, sat cross-legged beside her, and gently laid the teddy bear on a folded towel. "I could get in trouble," Maya added softly. No answer. But Chloe smiled. Slight. Quiet. It was more than Maya had seen since the slap. That night, Chloe returned again. And the night after. They never spoke. But Maya began humming lullabies under her breath. She folded napkins into animal shapes. She placed little cookies beside Chloe without comment. She thought no one noticed. Until one late afternoon, when Richard Sterling did. He was walking through the garden terrace behind the estate, trying to clear his head. Evelyn's portrait had fallen from the study wall earlier that morning, shattering the glass. It rattled him in a way he didn't want to admit. As he passed the greenhouse, he heard soft humming. Peering through the ivy-covered frame, he saw Chloe sitting in the dirt beside Maya. The woman was crouched beside her, using a spoon to dig up weeds like a tiny gardening game. Chloe laughed, a real sound. Then, as Maya handed her a cup of water, Chloe whispered something. Richard stepped closer, squinting. "Blue, flower." His heart stopped. He stepped fully into view. Maya gasped and scrambled to her feet, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Sterling, I didn't know you were..." But this time, he didn't yell. He just stared. At his daughter. Then at her. "You heard her," Maya said, voice shaking. She spoke to me. Richard opened his mouth, but no words came. Maya looked directly at him, blood long dried on her lip, resolve stronger than ever. You want to know why she never spoke before? She asked. Because silence is the only thing she shares with you. He flinched. You don't look at her, Mr. Sterling. Not really. You manage her like an asset. You protect her body, but not her soul. That little girl doesn't need more doctors. She needs someone who stays. Richard took a slow breath. He had built empires, out-negotiated titans, shut down governments with the flick of a pen, but he had no defense for this. He looked at Chloe, who stood now beside Maya, one hand resting on her apron pocket, then at Maya, bruised, exhausted, yet somehow more present than anyone in his house had been for years. And for the first time since Evelyn died, he listened. The basement smelled of bleach and steam. It was always warm, always humming, always a little too quiet. Maya had begun to measure her days by the rhythms of the machines, the sudden hiss of a dryer, the slow whirl of a rinse cycle. In that tiled underworld, time passed without sunlight, and moments blurred into linen and detergent. Maya stood before a mountain of sheets, her lower lip still split, a faint bruise blooming beneath her cheekbone. She didn't complain. Not to Denholm, not to the other maids, not even to herself. What would be the point? She had seen how Richard looked at her not as a person, but as a mistake. A trespasser. Someone who had dared to cross a line. And yet, every evening, Chloe kept showing up. The child never knocked, never made a sound. She simply appeared, holding her teddy bear like a ritual, her bare feet padding gently on the cool floor. Each time she came, Maya would act surprised, but she stopped pretending to be annoyed. On the third night, Maya placed 2 towels folded into rabbit ears on the floor. Chloe blinked at them, then sat between them like a queen seated among her guards. You're not supposed to be down here, Maya said quietly, her voice barely more than breath. He'd lose his mind if he knew. Chloe tilted her head. I know, Maya added. He already did. The girl reached out and touched Maya's hand, just 2 fingers, brief and feather-light. But the gesture sent a ripple through Maya's chest that she couldn't explain. She's connecting with you. The voice came from the stairs. Maya turned sharply. Evelyn's younger sister, Claire Richards' sister-in-law, stood with a tray in her hands, a mug of tea beside a bowl of chicken soup. She was in her mid-50s, with silver strands framing her auburn hair, her voice lined with time and grief. She used to follow her mother around just like that, Claire said, setting the tray on a nearby folding table. Didn't matter where Evelyn went, kitchen, bath, garden, Chloe was never more than 3 feet away. Maya stood up, brushing her apron. Miss Claire, I swear, I didn't call her down here. Claire waved her off. You didn't have to. Kids know where they feel safe. She handed Maya the tea. For the lip, she said softly, and the nerves. Maya hesitated before accepting it. Why are you being kind to me? Claire gave her a look. Because you're the first person in 3 years who got that girl to say anything besides a whisper in her sleep. Maya didn't know what to say. She sipped the tea and sat back down. Claire remained standing, watching Chloe arrange the towels into a stack. I should tell you, Claire said, her voice lowering. Evelyn was the one who held this place together. After she passed, Richard shut down. The staff turnover's been a revolving door. Nobody lasts more than a few months. He can't connect anymore. Not with Chloe, not with himself. I noticed, Maya murmured. Claire sighed. He was raised to believe that power fixes everything. But some things need tenderness, and he's forgotten what that feels like. Chloe let out a tiny giggle, a sound like bells wrapped in cotton as she perched the teddy bear on the towel pyramid. Maya and Claire both turned toward her. The girl smiled, unaware of the weight her joy carried. I'll keep it secret, Claire said, but if you keep reaching her, just be careful. That night, Maya didn't sleep. She sat on the cot in the corner of the staff quarters, a towel clutched in her hands like a prayer. Her cheek still throbbed, but her chest was heavier. Something was shifting. In her. In Chloe. In the house itself. The next morning, Maya returned to work before dawn. As she entered the service hallway, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and froze. Richard. His suit was perfectly tailored, his tie pinned straight, but his eyes were bleary, as if he hadn't slept. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I saw you with her, he said finally, voice rough. Yesterday, in the greenhouse. Maya stood still. Her heart pounded. You didn't report it, she replied. No, he said, looking away. I didn't. He cleared his throat. She spoke to you? Yes. A long silence. She said 2 words to me this morning, he added, almost to himself. 2. That's more than I've heard in 5 years. Maya kept her tone even. She has more in her. She just doesn't trust the air around her. Richard frowned. What does that mean? She doesn't feel safe speaking. She's afraid her words will disappear. He took a step forward, then stopped. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said abruptly, eyes locked on the bruise near her cheek. That day? I reacted. Maya stared at him. Yes, you did. The silence returned. Heavy. Uncomfortable. I want to move you upstairs, he said, to the main floor, as Chloe's private caregiver. Maya blinked. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Sterling. It's not about owing, he said. It's about fixing what I broke. She studied him. There was no arrogance in his tone this time. No sharpness. Just exhaustion. And something fragile beneath it. All right, she said finally. But I have conditions. Richard raised a brow. You're negotiating? I'm advocating, Maya corrected. For her. He nodded slowly. Name them. She sees me on her terms. No interventions, no tests, and no more yelling in front of her. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Agreed. Maya reached for her laundry cart. Then we'll start tomorrow. As she pushed it away, Chloe peeked around the corner of the hall. She smiled at Maya, then ducked out of sight. Richard watched her go, the silence stretching between them like a bridge neither had the words to cross. But something had started, and for once, in the house that silence built, a new sound had begun to echo. If you connected with Maya, Chloe, or even Richard, give this video a like to show your support. And comment where you're watching from, you never know. Someone near you might be watching too. Maya stood outside the door of the sunroom that had been converted into a playroom for Chloe. It was warm inside, sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting golden rectangles on the polished hardwood floor. The room smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish, quiet, peaceful, and far too pristine for a child who didn't speak or play. Today, that would change. She adjusted the strap of her apron, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Chloe sat on the rug near the window, her teddy bear in her lap. As usual. She turned when Maya entered, and something subtle, something soft, sparked in her eyes. Not surprise, not fear, something like recognition. Maya gave her a small wave and stepped into the room. She didn't speak at first, just knelt down beside the toy shelf and began rearranging a few items not for the sake of order, but to show she was there without demanding anything. Chloe watched in silence. You don't have to talk today, Maya said gently, her voice a low hum. Just sit with me. That's enough. From the corner of her eye, she saw the girl shift slightly, pulling her knees in closer to her chest, still holding the bear. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a box of colored flashcards, objects, emotions, animals. The same kind she had once used with Isaiah. She laid 3 cards on the rug, a bird, a cup, and a sundae. This one's for morning, Maya said, tapping the sun card. We see it when we wake up, warm and bright. Clue blinked. This one, Maya said, tapping the cup, we use when we're thirsty. And this, she tapped the bird. Flies high in the sky. Still, no response, but Chloe's gaze lingered on the bird card longer than the others. Maya took note. You like birds? She asked. Chloe didn't answer. But a finger tiny and careful reached out and nudged the card half an inch forward. It was enough. Maya smiled. They spent the next half hour in quiet rhythm. Maya didn't push words. She worked with gestures, nods, tiny choices. Chloe responded with silence, but active silence, the kind that buzzed with thought. Then came the sound of footsteps. Maya looked up as Richard entered the doorway. He was in shirt sleeves today. No tie. Sleeves rolled to his elbows. A legal pad in hand, as if he had stepped out of a meeting but couldn't stay away. He said nothing, just watched. Maya continued as though he wasn't there. She laid down a new set of cards this time. Happy, sad, and safe. She pointed to each, explaining quietly, "This is how we feel sometimes. It's okay to feel any of these." Chloe's eyes hovered over safe. Then, unexpectedly, she picked up the card and held it close to her chest. Richard exhaled barely. A sound caught between awe and heartbreak. Maya looked at him. "You see? She's not disconnected. She's just choosing who gets to hear her." Richard cleared his throat. "I've had a dozen therapists in this room. Not one of them got her to reach for a card. They probably didn't sit on the floor," Maya said simply. He didn't respond. Instead, he stepped forward and knelt stiffly, awkwardly on the opposite side of the rug. Chloe turned toward him but said nothing. "Do you remember this?" he asked softly, lifting a small wooden puzzle from the shelf. A sun and moon set with sliding pieces. Chloe didn't respond. Richard turned one of the pieces. "Your mom gave you this on your 2nd birthday. She said you'd grow up to chase the stars." Maya looked away. She hadn't heard that tone from him before, a quiet ache buried beneath the layers of command and control. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted suddenly. "Any of this." Maya looked at him. "You don't have to know. You just have to stay." That struck him. He stood up, brushing dust from his knees, his voice formal again. "I'll let you two continue." As he turned to leave, Chloe reached for the safe card again. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Stay." Richard froze. He turned around, eyes wide. "What did you say?" he asked. Chloe didn't repeat it. But her gaze was clear, direct, and for the first time, anchored. He didn't move for several seconds. Then, almost as if it required permission, he slowly lowered himself back onto the rug. He stayed. Later that evening, Maya sat with Claire on the side porch, sipping sweet tea as the crickets began to stir in the garden. She said, "Stay," Claire repeated, astonished. "She did." Claire nodded slowly, pride blooming across her expression. "That's a big word for a little girl." "It's not about the word," Maya said. "It's who she chose to say it to." Claire leaned back in her chair. "You've done more for that child in 2 weeks than a room full of specialists have in 5 years. Maya looked down at her tea, then up at the darkening sky. "I'm not a miracle worker. I'm just listening. That's the miracle, darling." Inside, Richard stood at the threshold of Chloe's room as she slept, teddy bear under her arm, cards spread out beside her pillow. The safe one rested under her hand. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He just stayed. Richard found himself standing in the middle of Evelyn's old studio, a room he had not entered in over 2 years. Dust clung to the tall windows, casting beams of filtered sunlight onto the worn hardwood floor. The air smelled like dried paint, cedar, and memory. He hadn't touched a thing since her death. Not the half-finished canvas by the easel. Not the tray of brushes still soaked in hardened color. Not the photo pinned to the wall, his favorite of her and Chloe. In the photo, Evelyn knelt in the garden with Chloe sitting in her lap, her arms gently wrapped around the toddler's belly. They were laughing. Chloe's face was tilted up, mouth open in what had surely been a squeal of joy. It was one of the only moments they'd ever caught of her expressing herself aloud. He stood there, staring at that photograph, when Maya's voice echoed in his head. "She doesn't feel safe speaking. She's afraid her words will disappear." He rubbed his thumb across the old frame, dust streaking the glass. That night, he didn't go to his study. He went to the kitchen, where Maya was rinsing off a bowl of strawberries at the sink. She looked over her shoulder, startled by his presence. "I didn't hear you come in." "I walk quietly," he said, then quickly added, "Not on purpose." Maya dried her hands on a towel. "Is something wrong?" "No," he hesitated. "Actually, maybe." He looked tired, not the tiredness of overwork, but the kind that sits in the bones, the ache of being wrong for too long. "I went into Evelyn's studio today," he said. Maya froze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That must have been difficult." "It was," he admitted, "but it reminded me that, once, there was laughter in this house, real joy. I haven't heard it since she died." Maya said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only true mirror for a man like Richard. He sat down at the edge of the long farmhouse table, resting his hands on the wood. "I know I've failed Chloe," he said. "I just don't know how to fix it." "You don't need to fix her," Maya replied, her voice firm but kind. "She's not broken. She's waiting." For what? For you, Maya said. Not the version of you that runs this house like a bank. The one in that photograph. The man who made her laugh. Richard blinked. That hit harder than he expected. He looked at Maya carefully, the steadiness in her eyes, the lack of fear despite what he'd done. The bruise was fading now, but the memory of that slap lingered like an echo in the room. I owe you an apology, he said finally. Maya raised an eyebrow. Another one? No, the real one, he replied. For hitting you, for humiliating you, for letting my fear turn into cruelty. Maya folded the towel slowly. Thank you, she said simply. That's the first thing you've said that's felt human. Richard didn't respond. He just watched her as she began to slice the strawberries, her hands calm and practiced. There was a peace about her that he couldn't quite name, something his world had always lacked. The next morning, Chloe was waiting in the sunroom when Maya arrived, sitting cross-legged on the rug with a stack of flashcards already in front of her. She had arranged them into 3 rows: emotions, animals, and colors. Well, someone's ready. Maya smiled, kneeling beside her. Shall we play teacher? Chloe nodded once. Okay, Maya said. Let's do something new today. She picked up the emotion cards and began describing scenarios. You get ice cream that's happy. You lose your teddy that's sad. You hear someone yelling that's... Chloe reached for the scared card. Maya nodded slowly. Good. They continued like that. And for the first time, Chloe began to point before Maya even finished her sentences. Her comprehension was sharp, crystal clear, and Maya's heart swelled watching her come alive through the smallest interactions. Then, just before lunch, Maya placed a new card in front of her. A simple word. Love. Midju. Chloe stared at it for a long moment. What do you think this means? Maya asked softly. Chloe didn't move. Then, without a word, she stood up and walked to the door. She opened it and looked down the hallway where Richard had just stepped out of his office. She pointed to him. Maya's throat tightened. That's love? Chloe nodded once, then added, almost inaudibly, sometimes. Richard had heard her. He froze in place, eyes wide. Maya turned toward him, caught between awe and amusement. She's poetic, Maya said quietly. She's her mother's daughter, Richard replied. Later that afternoon, Richard joined them in the playroom again. This time, he brought an old photo album. He placed it on the floor between them. Chloe watched as he flipped through pages. Beach trips, Halloween costumes, Evelyn's baby shower. I used to show her these, Richard said. Before, I stopped trying. You didn't stop trying, Maya corrected gently. You started grieving. Chloe leaned in and pointed at a picture, one with all 3 of them, Evelyn holding Chloe. Richard's arms wrapped around them both. Chloe tapped the faces gently, then looked up at him. More pictures? She asked, the words so soft they almost vanished. Richard nodded, overcome. As many as you want. May. That night, Maya walked through the halls of the estate feeling something she hadn't felt since her first day. Belonging. It was quiet, not the cold, sterile silence from before, but the kind of quiet that follows music, where every step holds a rhythm waiting to return. In Chloe's room, the little girl lay curled under her blanket, a flashcard tucked beneath her pillow. Love. Richard stood in the doorway again, just watching her breathe. And this time, when Maya passed by, he didn't walk away. He said, stay. A soft drizzle blanketed the estate the next morning. Rain tapped rhythmically on the tall glass panes of the sunroom, drawing faint lines down their surface, like tears on a silent face. Inside, Chloe sat with Maya by the window, tracing the drops with her finger while Maya gently braided the girl's hair. There was something sacred in these quiet rituals. No schedules, no expectations, just 2 souls learning to exist beside each other. Maya had become part of Chloe's daily routine in a way no one else had, not the therapists, not the tutors, not even the housekeepers who had tried to offer her toys and sweets. It wasn't about noise. It was about presence. Maya was there, fully, gently, always. That morning as they sat by the window, Maya pulled a small envelope from her apron pocket. I brought something, she said, holding it out. It's a letter. That's... Chloe looked at it, curious but unsure. It's from someone who loved you very much, Maya continued, her voice low and warm. Your mother. Chloe's eyes widened. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the paper as if it might vanish at her touch. I didn't know she'd written it until Claire gave it to me, Maya said. She wrote it a few weeks before she passed. She told Claire to give it to someone who made you feel safe. I guess she meant me. Chloe held the letter gently but didn't open it. She placed it in her lap and looked up at Maya with a single word in her eyes. Why? Because your mom wanted you to know she saw you, Maya whispered. Not just your quiet, but your strength. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Chloe whispered, Will you read it? Maya hesitated. She looked at the door. No Richard in sight. Okay, she said, unfolding the letter with reverent care. Her voice trembled as she began. My dearest Chloe, if you're reading this, then I'm not with you in the way I want to be. I hope, more than anything, that you feel surrounded by love, even if my arms can't hold you anymore. I know this world isn't always gentle with the quiet ones, but you, my darling girl, carry a different kind of light. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to perform to be seen. Your silence is not emptiness, it's full of wonder, full of depth. One day, someone will understand that. I hope, by now, someone already has. And I hope that person reminds you every single day that you are loved, that your voice matters, that when you're ready to speak, truly speak, someone will be there to listen, not just hear. I'm still listening, Chloe. Always. Love. Mom. When Maya finished, she folded the letter slowly, placing it back into the envelope. Chloe stared at her hands for a long moment. Then, with a fragile breath, she reached out not for the letter, but for Maya's hand. Her little fingers curled around Maya's thumb. She was right, Chloe whispered. Maya looked down at her, startled. About what? You listen. Tears welled in Maya's eyes, but she blinked them away before Chloe could see. Across the hall, Richard stood in the doorway of his study. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the moment he heard Evelyn's handwriting come to life through Maya's voice, he couldn't walk away. He leaned against the wall, staring at the hardwood floor, her words echoing in his head. One day, someone will understand her. He had failed to be that someone. Until now. Later that day, Maya was setting up a quiet activity in the playroom when Richard entered, holding a small wooden box. He looked awkward, like a man holding a truth he didn't know how to unwrap. I heard about the letter, he said. Maya didn't flinch. Claire gave it to me. Evelyn meant for Chloe to have it when she was ready. She's ready, Richard said, almost in disbelief. He walked over to the low table and placed the box on top. I found this in Evelyn's things, he said. It's a keepsake box. I never opened it after she died. Maya raised an eyebrow. Why now? Because it's time, he said simply. He opened the lid. Inside were mementos. A hospital bracelet. A photo strip of Evelyn kissing Chloe's chubby cheeks. A napkin with smeared crayon drawings. And at the very bottom, a note in Evelyn's handwriting, for Chloe's heart when she's strong enough to carry it. Richard looked at Maya. I think she island. He turned to Chloe, who had entered the room quietly, holding the envelope in her small hands. She saw the box. Her eyes lit up. Richard knelt beside her. This is from your mom, he said softly. She saved it. For you. Chloe placed the envelope gently beside the box, then looked at Maya. Can we read it again? She asked. Maya smiled. Of course. As Maya began reading the letter again, Richard sat quietly on the rug, watching Chloe lean her head against Maya's shoulder. The moment was fragile, and he didn't want to disturb it. But something inside him shifted. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't feel like a visitor in his own home. He felt invited. Autumn began to settle in around the Sterling estate, painting the trees with amber and gold. The garden, once precisely trimmed and coldly manicured by professionals, now bloomed with a kind of imperfect warmth. Fallen leaves danced in the wind, vines stretched beyond their borders, and for the first time in years, Chloe was allowed to walk barefoot on the grass. Maya had started their mornings in the garden, not with therapy or games, but with presence. They walked among the sunflowers, picked dried petals, and collected acorns in a jar they kept on the porch. It wasn't just healing, it was life. This morning, Chloe tugged gently at Maya's hand, pulling her toward the old bench under the willow tree. "Can we sit?" she asked. "Of course." Maya sat down, her apron slightly damp from the morning dew. Chloe climbed up beside her, resting her head against Maya's side. The willow leaves swayed above them, whispering secrets only the wind could understand. After a few minutes of quiet, Chloe looked up. "Do you think she hears me?" Maya didn't need to ask who she meant. "I think she hears everything," Maya replied. "And I think she's proud of you. Every word you've said, every breath you've taken, she's with you." Chloe nodded solemnly, then whispered, "I didn't speak because I thought she wouldn't hear me anymore." Maya felt something twist inside her. She wrapped her arm around Chloe gently. "She never stopped listening, but you were waiting for the right moment. That takes courage." From the distance, the heavy creak of the back door sounded. Richard stepped out into the garden, wearing a wool coat and holding a cup of coffee. He looked oddly unsure of himself, like a man about to enter a space he didn't quite feel worthy of. When Chloe saw him, she didn't stiffen, she didn't run. She waved. Richard smiled, a little surprised, and made his way down the stone path. "Morning," he said quietly. "Maya noddet. Morning." He looked at the bench. "May I?" Chloe patted the space beside her. "It's warm." He chuckled and sat, careful not to crowd her. They sat in silence for a while, not the strained, uncomfortable silence they used to live in, but one that had room for breath. "I used to sit here with Evelyn," Richard said suddenly, looking toward the tree. "She'd make tea, talk about how she wanted Chloe to grow up wild, curious, unafraid." Chloe looked up. "Was I ever wild?" Richard smiled. "You were, especially in the sandbox. You once made a mud pie and tried to feed it to my lawyer." Maya laughed. "That's the kind of girl I'd like to meet." "No, she's still in there," Richard said, this time to Chloe. "You didn't lose her, you just got quiet." Chloe shifted closer, resting her hand lightly over his. "I'm not afraid when Maya's here," she whispered. Richard looked at Maya. Their eyes met. A recognition passed between them. Not love. Not yet. But understanding. Respect. A quiet acknowledgement of what had been broken and what was slowly being rebuilt. That afternoon, Claire arrived for tea. She always brought homemade cornbread and a dose of sharp honesty. "So," she said, placing her tin on the counter, "word in the house is that the child is speaking, and the master of the house is learning to say thank you. The apocalypse must be near." Maya grinned. "You should have seen him this morning. Sat on the bench like a human being." Claire laughed, then turned serious. "You know it's not easy for him. Pride like that doesn't fold easily." "I'm not asking him to fold," Maya said, placing teacups on a tray. "Just bend. Enough to see his daughter. Enough to listen." Claire nodded approvingly. "And what about you? Are you all right?" Maya paused. "Most days, yes. And the ones that aren't?" Maya looked down at the teacups. "I remember the slap. I remember how small I felt. And then, I remember her voice." Claire didn't speak for a moment. Then she reached out and gently squeezed Maya's hand. "Forgiveness is hard, especially when it's deserved. You're handling it with more grace than most." "It's not about grace," Maya replied. "It's about Chloe. Everything Island." Later that evening, Maya found a note slipped under her door. "Dinner in the solarium. Just us. R.S." She stared at it for a long time. The handwriting was tight, formal, the kind of penmanship born in boardrooms and contracts. But there was a crack in its surface. An invitation. She dressed simply. A navy blouse, flat shoes, a scarf tucked around her neck, hiding the faint bruise that had never fully disappeared. The solarium was dimly lit. One long table, 2 seats, candles. Richard stood at the end, awkward but sincere. "I didn't know what you liked," he said. "So I asked Claire. She said not to serve anything that had foam on top." Maya laughed. "That sounds like her." Dinner was quiet, gentle, roast chicken, steamed vegetables, peach cobbler from Claire's tin. They talked about Chloe, about Evelyn's art, about growing up in Alabama, and spending Sundays in iron dresses that always itched. And then, between sips of tea, Richard said quietly, "You've changed this house." Maya looked at him. "No, I just reminded it what warmth feels like." He held her gaze. "And me?" "You're remembering." He nodded slowly. "Do you trust me yet?" Maya's expression softened. Ask me again when the silence stops being your armor. Richard didn't speak. He just looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time, not as staff, not as a problem, but as a person who had given more to his daughter than he had ever managed to. Later, as she walked back to her quarters, she heard Chloe's voice from behind the door. A lullaby, soft, unsteady, but hers. Maya leaned against the wall, closed her eyes, and smiled. The first frost arrived on a Thursday morning, coating the estate's windows with crystalline lace. Maya wrapped Chloe in a knitted scarf, tugging the ends snug under her chin as they stood by the front door, waiting for the school van. It had taken weeks of gentle suggestion, quiet coaxing, and patient reassurance, but Chloe had finally agreed to try a few hours a week at the small community learning center downtown, a private program for children with language delays, led by a retired speech therapist and a therapy dog named Murphy. "You can come with me today," Chloe whispered as Maya buttoned her coat. Maya smiled, brushing a curl from her cheek. "I wish I could, baby. But I'll be right here when you get back. Promise." Chloe nodded. She still didn't love goodbyes, but now, she believed in returns. As the van pulled into the driveway, Richard stepped out of the house, phone in one hand, coffee in the other. His eyes scanned the scene quickly, as if checking for potential cracks in the day. "Everything all right?" he asked. Maya gave him a gentle look. "She's ready." Chloe hugged Maya tightly, then turned and walked with the aide toward the van. Richard watched her go, heart catching in his throat. She climbed in, looked back through the window, and waved. Richard stared at Maya. "She waved at me," he said, stunned. "She did," Maya replied. "You should wave back next time." He blinked, then smiled sheepishly. "Right. Mo." They stood together in the cold for a moment, watching the van disappear. "You look nervous," Maya teased. "I've spent 5 years fearing this moment," he admitted, watching her go out into a world I've failed to prepare her for. Maya crossed her arms, her voice calm. "You're not preparing her to survive the world. You're preparing her to belong in it." He turned toward her, searching her face. "You really believe that? I wouldn't be here if I didn't." The day moved slower without Chloe. The house was too quiet, not in the oppressive way it once was, but in a new, unfamiliar stillness. Maya spent the morning organizing Chloe's growing collection of flashcards and sketches. Then, after lunch, she wandered into the library, a room she had passed 100 times but never entered. It was breathtaking. Tall shelves lined with leather-bound books, ladders that slid on rails, a grand window that overlooked the lake. Dust motes floated like magic in the afternoon Sunday. Maya wandered the aisles, running her fingers along the spines. She stopped when she found an old children's book, The Listening Tree. The cover was worn, the pages slightly yellowed. Inside the front flap, a name written in delicate cursive, Evelyn Sterling. She sat in the oversized armchair and began to read. Halfway through, Richard appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of tea. "I figured you'd be here." Maya looked up. "This was hers, wasn't it?" He nodded. "She used to read it to Chloe in the garden, over and over." Maya smiled softly. "It's about a tree that doesn't speak, but always listens." Richard handed her the tea. "Seems familiar." They sat quietly, sipping their drinks. Then Richard asked something he hadn't dared before. "Why did you stay?" Maya looked into her cup. "Because she needed me," she said after a moment. "Because no one else was listening to her the way she needed to be heard." "Mice," he nodded slowly. "And me? Did I ever have a chance at earning your trust?" Maya studied him. "You didn't try to earn it, not at first. You tried to control the silence instead of facing it. That's not trust, that's fear." He took a deep breath, letting that sink in. "And now? Now you're starting to hear the things that matter." He leaned back in his chair. "I was angry when you arrived. At the world. At God. At Evelyn. But mostly, at myself." Maya nodded. Grief comes with sharp teeth. He looked at her. "I didn't just lose Evelyn. I lost me. The man she married. The man who laughed in the kitchen and sang off key lullabies. I buried him with her." Maya's eyes softened. "Then maybe it's time to unbury him." That afternoon, the van returned. Chloe stepped out slowly, holding something behind her back. Maya met her at the steps, crouching to eye level. "How was it?" Chloe smiled and revealed a folded piece of construction paper. On the front, she had drawn a tree tall and strong, its trunk covered in hearts. Above it, written in careful, blocky letters, "My listening tree." Maya opened the card. Inside, Chloe had drawn herself and Maya sitting under the tree, with the words, "I talk because you waited." Maya couldn't speak. She just held the card to her chest and pulled Chloe into a hug. From the window, Richard watched, his throat tight. Later that evening, after dinner, he stepped into the garden alone. The air was crisp, the stars beginning to pierce the dusk. He walked to the old bench under the willow tree, and there, quietly waiting, was Maya. "I had a feeling you'd come here," she said. He sat beside her, their shoulders not quite touching. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what Evelyn wanted for Chloe, about what I've become." Maya turned toward him. "And I want to become someone Chloe isn't afraid to become one day. Someone she could look at and say, 'That's what love looks like.'" Maya was quiet. "And what does love look like to you, Mr. Sterling?" He looked at her, really looked. "It looks like patience, grace, bruises that turn into bridges." Maya inhaled deeply, the cold air sharp in her chest. "That's a start." And under the stars, between silence and something almost like forgiveness, two people sat beneath a tree that listened to them both. The first snow came early that year, catching even the staff off guard. Thick flakes drifted like confetti over the Sterling estate, frosting the stone gates and blanketing the hedges in silence. Inside, warmth blossomed in every room. Fireplaces lit, mugs steaming on side tables, the soft sound of music humming from the old Victrola in the parlor. It was the first Christmas season Chloe would remember where she felt at home. In the corner of the living room stood a grand tree, tall enough to brush the coffered ceiling. Claire had gone overboard with decorations, velvet bows, silver baubles, and ornaments from decades past. But it was Chloe who had insisted on one thing, a single white bird at the top. For the one who listened, she had whispered. Maya stood in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting the collar of her navy blue sweater. Her reflection looked different these days. The bruises were gone, but something deeper had shifted, a softening in her jaw, a light behind her eyes. Still, there was a hesitation, a quiet tug in her chest. She was healing, but healing wasn't the same as forgetting. Behind her, a knock. She turned to find Richard standing at the doorframe, holding two small boxes wrapped in simple paper. "Too early for gifts?" he asked. "It's 3 weeks till Christmas," Maya said. "But no, not too early." He stepped in slowly. "One's for Chloe, the other's for you." Maya raised an eyebrow. "You don't strike me as the wrap-it-yourself type." "Claire helped," he confessed. "I tried, failed, gave up." Maya chuckled. "That sounds more like you." They stood in the hallway, the air oddly fragile. Snowflakes dusted the windows like powdered sugar. Richard cleared his throat. "Do you remember what you told me the night you read Evelyn's letter?" "I've said a lot of things you probably wish I hadn't," she teased. "No." He looked serious now. "You said that Chloe wasn't broken, just waiting, that she needed someone who didn't look away when she was silent." Maya nodded. "And you stopped looking away." He hesitated, then stepped closer. "So, I want to ask you something. Personal." Maya stiffened slightly but didn't move. "Do you think you've ever been seen the way Chloe needed to be?" The question surprised her. She glanced toward the window, thinking. "I was married once," she said finally. "Young, eager, too hopeful maybe." Richard listened without interrupting. "He didn't hit me," Maya continued, "but he erased me, slowly. I became invisible in my own house, every thought dismissed, every fear minimized. I stopped talking long before I packed my bags. And after that, I became someone who watched everything. Read rooms like maps. Anticipated what others needed before they asked." She paused. "But I never asked what I needed." Richard's voice was low. "And now?" Maya looked him in the eyes. "Now I have a child who looks at me and believes her voice matters. That's more healing than years of therapy." He exhaled, hands in his coat pockets. "You make this place feel like Evelyn never left." "She did," Maya replied softly. "But she left seeds behind. Chloe. This house. You. It's not about filling her shoes. It's about watering what she planted. That night, after Chloe went to bed, Maya returned to her room and opened the small gift box Richard had handed her earlier. Inside was a folded photograph. Old, black and white, a woman standing proudly in front of a modest southern church, flanked by two little girls in Sunday dresses. On the back, in Richard's handwriting, "My mother, 1963, Selma, Alabama. She taught me what quiet strength looks like. You reminded me." Below it, a small silver pendant. A tree branches outstretched, roots deep and strong. Maya stared at it for a long time, emotions pressing against her ribs like waves. It wasn't jewelry, it was acknowledgement. The next day, Chloe and Maya spent the morning making handprint ornaments from flour dough. Chloe giggled when Maya pressed her palm into the soft clay and made a messy circle. They painted the dried ones later with gold and silver, stringing ribbon through the top. "Yours is bigger," Chloe said, comparing palms. "That's because I've lived longer," Maya replied. "Will mine get big too?" Maya smiled. It already island. They hung their ornaments near the bottom of the tree eye level for Chloe and stepped back to admire their work. Richard entered just then, holding a plate of gingerbread cookies. "I come bearing peace offerings," he said. "Claire made them, of course." Maya took one. "You're lucky to have her." "I'm lucky to have you," he said without thinking. Chloe looked up. "Does that mean Maya's staying?" Silence. Not the heavy kind. The surprised, heart-skipping kind. Richard turned to Maya. "Only if she wants to." Maya looked at Chloe, at the little hands dusted with flour and gold paint. Then at Richard, the man who had once struck her in fear, now standing quietly in gratitude. "I'm already here," she said. "The rest is just paperwork." Chloe clapped. Richard smiled. And in the quiet that followed, nothing needed to be said. The house had changed. It had a voice again. The calm didn't last. It never does. It was 2 days before Christmas when the past came knocking. The day had started like any other, the smell of cinnamon from the kitchen, Claire humming hymns as she prepped sweet potato pies, and Chloe drawing a snowman family with little name tags: Maya, Daddy, me. Maya watched her with quiet joy, brushing flour from the girl's cheek. "You gave me a smile," she said. "That's the best Christmas gift I've ever gotten." But by noon, the estate's silence shattered. A black SUV pulled up the front drive. The kind of car that didn't belong in snow, unless it had a mission. Richard opened the door himself, brow furrowed. A man stepped out, tall, sharply dressed, with a face Maya hadn't seen in 5 years but had never forgotten. "Martin," Richard said. "I didn't expect you." Martin Wexler, Evelyn's brother. A corporate attorney with a talent for politics and a knack for tension. He hadn't visited once since the funeral. Not a phone call, not a card, just vanished into Manhattan's skyline. And now, suddenly, he stood in their foyer like a storm dressed in cashmere. "I was in the area," Martin said with a tight smile. "Thought I'd check in, family and all." Richard didn't believe him for a second. Maya emerged from the hallway, holding Chloe's hand. When Martin saw her, his expression twisted recognition, then cold surprise. "You're still here?" he asked. Maya nodded calmly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Wexler. You were the one Evelyn hired, weren't you? Temporary help?" "She's more than that," Richard said firmly. Martin raised an eyebrow. Clearly, Chloe clung to Maya's side, her small fingers curling tighter. "I'm going to take her upstairs," Maya said softly to Richard, and he nodded. But before she left, Martin added with an edge, "I hope you've been compensated appropriately for your prolonged presence." Maya didn't answer. She simply walked away, calm but shaken. In the study, Martin made himself a drink like he owned the place. "She looks comfortable," he said, sipping scotch. "The maid. She's not a maid anymore." "Ah, so what is she now, Richard? Nanny? Advisor? Confidante?" Richard's jaw tightened. "She's family." Martin laughed. "You always did fall for the savior types. Evelyn had that streak too. But this isn't one of her charity galas. This is your daughter's future. Do you think your board is going to smile upon your unconventional household?" "I don't care what the board thinks." Martin leaned in, voice dropping. "You should, especially since Evelyn left a clause in her trust. If the board deems the household environment unstable, They can freeze Chloe's trust until she turns 21. Richard stiffened. You wouldn't dare. I don't have to. They're already whispering. Upstairs, Maya sat with Chloe on her bed, brushing through her curls with careful fingers. Do you know who he is? Chloe asked quietly. Your uncle, Maya replied. Why does he talk like he's better than people? Maya paused. Because some people confuse power with value, but they're not the same. Will he make me stop talking again? Maya turned toward her, kneeling so their eyes met. No one can take your voice from you, Chloe. Not ever again. Mass. That night, Richard came to Maya's door. He looked drained. The man who once commanded boardrooms with fire and certainty now stood with apology written into his posture. Why is he here? Maya asked before he could speak. He's here to intimidate, to remind me that money is a leash and legacy is a trap. Will you let him win? Richard looked at her. I don't know how to protect both of you. Maya stepped closer. Then learn. 1. He studied her, the woman he once saw as help, now the anchor to everything that mattered. I can't lose her, he said. Not now. Not again. Then don't hide behind lawyers. Don't let him twist Evelyn's name into a weapon. Richard nodded slowly. Will you stand with me? Maya didn't hesitate. I already am. The next morning, Chloe handed Maya a piece of paper. It was a drawing, Martin standing in the snow with a speech bubble that simply said, blah blah blah. Maya tried not to laugh. Should I show it to your dad? Chloe smirked. Maybe wait. Later that day, Richard called a meeting. Not in the boardroom, not in the office. In the living room, fireplace lit. Chloe's drawing of the white bird taped above the mantel. Martin stood near the door, arms crossed, already bored. I want to be clear, Richard began. This house is my daughter's sanctuary. Anyone who attempts to threaten that, legal or otherwise, will find themselves locked out permanently. Martin raised an eyebrow. Is that a threat? It's a promise, Richard said. She found her voice here, and she'll never be silenced again. Maya stood behind Chloe on the staircase. The girl listened carefully. Martin smirked. You're letting your emotions make business decisions. No, Richard replied. I'm letting my daughter guide my humanity. Something you should try. Martin didn't respond. He simply turned and walked out, his expensive shoes echoing against the tile. When the door shut, Chloe ran down the stairs and into her father's arms. You protected us, she said. Richard blinked. You heard that? She nodded. All of it. He looked at Maya, then at his daughter, and for the first time, the weight of the past didn't feel like a chain. It felt like a lesson. The snowstorm came overnight. By morning, the entire estate was blanketed under a soft, white hush, as if the world had paused to breathe. Inside, however, the air was far from still. Something had shifted since Martin's visit. It lingered in the corners of the house like smoke. Even Chloe noticed it. He didn't like me, she said quietly at breakfast, poking at her scrambled eggs. Maya leaned in. Some people don't understand kindness when they see it. Chloe tilted her head. But I wasn't even mean. No, you didn't have to be, Maya replied gently. You were honest. That scares people who aren't. Richard sat across the table, unusually quiet. The events of the day before replayed in his mind. Martin's warning, the veiled threats about the board, the clause in Evelyn's trust. For all the fire in his speech, the truth was harder to swallow. Martin had been right about one thing. The board had power, and if they chose to weaponize it, Richard could lose legal guardianship of his daughter, or worse, lose control of her future. But he wouldn't tell Chloe that, or Maya. Not yet. After breakfast, Richard retreated to his office. He pulled out the file marked ES Trust, Private, and reviewed the documents Evelyn had signed nearly 6 years ago. There it was, in stark black ink, a clause inserted as a protective measure. If more than half the board deemed the home environment unstable, the trust could be locked until Chloe's adulthood. It had been Evelyn's idea not out of distrust, but out of fear. She had watched Richard crumble after her diagnosis. She knew grief could swallow men whole, and now that clause hovered like a noose. Claire entered the office with fresh coffee. She paused when she saw the open file. So, she said cautiously, are we fighting shadows or preparing for war? Both, Richard muttered. She set the mug down. You can't protect Chloe by becoming the man you used to be. "I'm not planning to," he said. "But I may have to stand before the board and prove that this home, this life is good enough. That Maya's presence here is part of what healed it." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Then tell the truth. She's not family, not legally, but she's everything else," Claire said. "And if they can't see that, you're in the wrong room." Meanwhile, Maya took Chloe out into the snow-covered yard. They built a small snow fort and decorated it with branches and ribbons. Chloe placed one of her hand-painted ornaments on the top, the white bird again. "I want her to see it," she said. Maya paused. "Who?" "My mom," Chloe whispered. "Do you think she can?" Maya smiled softly. "I think she never stopped watching." Ugh. They sat together inside the tiny fort, sipping hot chocolate from thermoses. Chloe looked up at Maya with her big, solemn eyes. "Will I always live here?" Maya hesitated. "What do you mean?" "I heard Daddy talking on the phone. Something about people wanting to take me." Maya's heart clenched. She wrapped an arm around Chloe and pulled her close. "No one is taking you," she said firmly. "Not while I'm here. Not while your father's here. Promise?" Maya kissed the top of her head. "Promise." But her words echoed back at her, and with them, a chill she couldn't shake. That night, Richard knocked on Maya's door. She opened it slowly, already sensing something was wrong. "We have to talk," he said. She stepped aside, letting him in. He stood by the window, staring at the snow falling outside. "The clause in Evelyn's trust is real," he began, "and Martin's not bluffing. The board has already started asking questions." Maya crossed her arms. "About me?" "Yes. About everything." She stayed quiet. "I know you've endured more than you ever should have in this house," Richard continued, "but if you're willing, I'd like you to testify at the trust review hearing." Maya blinked. "Testify? Not in court. Just to the board. They need to hear from you. About Chloe. About what you've built together." Maya looked down, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. "They won't want to hear from me, Richard. I'm not a Sterling. I'm not legacy. I'm a black woman they think got lucky with a generous job offer." "They're wrong," he said. "You're the reason my daughter has a voice. You're the reason I started listening again." Maya stepped back, the weight of it all settling on her. "I've never asked to be more than what I am," she said. "But every time I try to simply exist, someone reminds me that my place is conditional." Richard moved toward her. "This isn't about conditions, it's about truth. And I can't tell it without you." Maya looked at him, really looked, and saw the wear in his eyes. But more than that, she saw humility. The kind that comes after failure. The kind that has to be earned. "I'll speak," she said softly. "But not for them. For Chloe." In the quiet hours of the night, Maya sat at her desk, writing down every moment she could remember with Chloe. The first time she said, "apple." The night she read Evelyn's letter. The morning they sang lullabies in the garden. She didn't write it for a boardroom. She wrote it as a record. A proof. A kind of living testimony that love, real love, doesn't come with conditions. It comes with time, patience, and presence. And in a world that tried to measure her by silence, Maya had chosen to speak. For the little girl who finally found her voice. And for herself, the day of the board hearing arrived with a hard, gray sky overhead. It hadn't snowed again, but the roads were slick with frost, and the wind cut sharp through even the thickest coats. Maya dressed simply a dark green blouse, slacks, and a wool coat Claire insisted she borrow. Her curls were tied back neatly, her lips bare. No makeup. No mask. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to be heard. Richard waited by the car, straightening his tie more out of habit than nerves. Chloe stayed home with Claire, unaware that her future was being debated in a room of strangers who had never once played in the garden or listened to her sing under the willow tree. The drive downtown was quiet, but not tense. They had said everything that needed saying the night before. "You don't owe them anything," Richard had told her. "I owe Chloe everything," Maya had replied. The Sterling Foundation Board was housed in an old brick building near the university. Inside, the conference room smelled of paper, lemon polish, and generational power. 10 people sat around a long oak table, 7 men, 3 women, all in their 60s or older. Wealth sat on their shoulders like old coats. At the head sat Miriam Ashcroft, board chair. She wore a silk scarf and a tight expression. Mr. Sterling, she said, as Richard and Maya entered. And Miss Williams, is it? Maya nodded. Maya William. Of course, Miriam said, her voice dry. We understand you've been involved in the child's care. Richard opened his mouth, but Maya spoke first. I've been more than involved, she said calmly. I've been present. Every day. When she woke screaming from night terrors. When she refused to eat. When she finally said her first full sentence. The board shifted, some surprised at her directness. Miriam looked down at a document. Miss William, you were hired as household staff, correct? I was hired as a maid, Maya said. But no one else in that house got on the floor to sing to her. No one else listened when she couldn't speak. There was a pause, a subtle shift in the room. And Mr. Sterling, one board member asked, what is your relationship with Miss William now? Richard leaned forward. She is my daughter's caregiver, her safe person, her voice when the world is too loud. And she's also the only reason I am sitting here as a father instead of a failure. Someone scoffed lightly down the table. This seems personal. It is personal, Richard snapped, because the clause in Evelyn's trust was meant to protect Chloe, not punish her for finding comfort in someone unexpected. Another board member, a woman with silver hair and warm eyes, cleared her throat. Miss William, you said Chloe spoke her first sentence to you? Maya nodded. We were in the garden. She was painting a white bird ornament. She looked at me and said, I talk, because you waited. Silence fell across the room. No one dared breathe. Then Miriam shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The board is responsible for ensuring the child's environment is stable, structured, and appropriate for her development. She's thriving, Maya said, her voice strong now. You want a report? Look at her eyes. Look at her laughter. Look at the way she hugs her father now instead of flinching. That's not instability. That's healing. Richard looked around the table. I know how this works. You're going to vote. You're going to decide if the trust remains accessible under my guardianship. But you need to understand if you rule against us, you're not protecting her. You're punishing her for finding safety. The silver-haired woman leaned forward. And if we rule in your favor? Maya answered. Then maybe, just maybe, Chloe will grow up in a world where love matters more than pedigree. They left the hearing room unsure of the outcome. The board would vote in private. Richard offered to take Maya out for coffee, but she declined politely. I think I need to walk, she said. Clear my head. Richard nodded. Let me know when you're home safe. She walked through the cold streets, past shop windows glowing with holiday decorations. Children pressed faces to the glass, pointing at train sets and dolls. Maya paused at one display, a snow globe, sitting among fake snow and pine cones. Inside it, a tiny tree stood under a painted sky. She remembered Chloe's voice. My listening tree. Back at the estate, Claire met her at the door with a blanket and cocoa. You did it, Claire said. Maya shook her head. Not yet. Yes, baby, you did. Whether they recognize it or not. That evening, just after dinner, the phone rang. Richard answered, pacing near the fireplace. Maya watched from the staircase as his face went still. He nodded slowly, then closed his eyes and exhaled. He turned toward her. They voted, he said. Unanimous. We keep the trust. No changes. Full guardianship remains. Claire clapped her hands, tears already welling. Maya sat on the stairs, stunned. They saw you, Richard added. They heard you. Maya blinked. I didn't know if they would. You weren't speaking for them, he said. You were speaking for her, and that's why it worked. From the hallway, Chloe peeked out, sensing celebration. What happened? She asked. Richard crouched down. They said we get to stay a family. Chloe beamed. Can we still decorate the gingerbread house tonight? Maya laughed, wiping a tear. Yes, baby. Let's build the biggest one yet. And as they gathered in the kitchen, three people bound not by blood, but by healing, the storm outside faded into something soft. Like peace. The gingerbread house stood crooked and glorious. Gumdrops ran along the roof like mismatched shingles. Icing dripped down the candy cane columns, and Chloe had insisted on sticking a single chocolate heart right in the center of the doorway. So everyone who walks in knows it's a love house, she'd said. Maya couldn't stop smiling. Claire is going to think a tornado hit her kitchen, Richard muttered. trying to clean a smear of frosting off his blazer sleeve. Let her, Maya replied. This is the first time she's heard real laughter echo off these walls in years. Chloe ran to her room to grab something, another ornament she wanted to add to the top. Richard and Maya stood alone in the dining room, surrounded by the warm scent of cinnamon and ginger. You were right, Richard said quietly. About what? That healing takes time, and that some things can't be rebuilt, they have to be reimagined. Maya looked at him, her eyes steady. You didn't just rebuild, Richard. You showed up. That's more than most ever do. His gaze lingered on her a moment longer than usual. There was something different in it, not gratitude, not just admiration. A knowing, a weight shared. But before either could say another word, Chloe barreled back into the room holding a small box, wrapped in gold tissue. This is for Maya, she said, eyes sparkling. You can't open it till tomorrow morning. Maya crouched down. You got me a gift? Chloe nodded. Daddy helped. Richard shrugged, trying to look casual. She made me promise. Maya pulled her close. Then I'll wait. No peeking, Chloe warned, giggling as she ran off again to prepare stockings with Claire. Maya turned to Richard, eyebrow raised. You do realize I didn't get you anything? He grinned. You being here is enough. She rolled her eyes. That's dangerously sentimental. I've been hanging around you too long. Bode. Later that night, after Chloe had gone to bed, Maya found herself in the music room. The piano was old, hadn't been tuned in years, but she touched the keys lightly, letting the memory of her childhood return. Her mother had taught her to play, on Sundays, before church, before everything went quiet in their house, before the accident. Maya closed her eyes and pressed down a single chord. Then another. The notes were shaky, but they held. And soon, the room filled with something old and aching, not quite a song, more like a whisper from long ago. Richard stepped in silently, watching from the doorway. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, she wiped a tear from her cheek. Sorry. Don't be, he said. That was the most honest thing I've heard all day. She looked up at him. Music was the last thing my mother and I shared before she passed. He nodded slowly. You brought music back to this house. Christmas morning arrived with a quiet snowfall. The estate glowed not from decorations, but from something less visible. Laughter echoed down the hallways. The smell of maple bacon and biscuits drifted from the kitchen. Chloe bounced from room to room in snowflake pajamas. They opened presents slowly, thoughtfully. No rush, no chaos. Claire gifted Maya a hand-sewn apron with "Boss Lady" stitched across the front. Richard received a framed photo Chloe had drawn, the three of them standing under the listening tree, holding hands. And then, Maya finally opened Chloe's gift. Inside was a hand-painted wooden block with a quote carved into it in careful letters. You waited, and I bloomed. Love, Chloe. Maya held the block in her hands like it was made of glass. Tears stung the corners of her eyes. You made this? Chloe nodded proudly. Daddy helped with the words. Richard looked away, just slightly. She told me what she wanted it to say. Maya didn't speak. She couldn't, but her eyes said everything. That night, after dinner and carols and a dozen hugs from Chloe, Maya stepped out into the backyard alone. The snow crunched softly under her boots as she walked to the willow tree. Lights had been strung along its branches, Claire's idea, and it now glowed with a quiet reverence. Maya stood beneath it, watching the snow fall. She thought of her first night here, the fear, the slap, the blood in her mouth and the silence she swallowed. She thought of Evelyn's letter. She thought of the little girl who had never spoken and now wouldn't stop talking. And she thought of Richard, watching her from a distance, trying so hard not to mess things up again. She didn't hear him approach. But suddenly, he was there beside her. You found your spot, he said gently. I think it found me. No. They stood in silence, the snow falling between them. I owe you an apology, he said finally. Not just for that day, but for all the days I looked at you and only saw what I was afraid of. Maya turned toward him. And what was that? That I could be wrong. That someone else could be better for Chloe than me. You weren't wrong, she said. You just weren't ready, but you are now. He nodded, breath fogging in the cold. What do we do next? Maya smiled softly. We keep showing up, every day, even when it's messy. Together? Maya looked at him. Is there any other way? And under the glow of the willow tree, the one that had stood silent for years, two people stood not as saviors or victims, or even employers, but as something entirely new, a family, still becoming. Winter stretched on, blanketing the Sterling estate in stillness. The snow became a kind of rhythm: fall, melt, freeze again. It changed the way sound moved through the world, softened the edges of everything. And inside the house, something else was softening too. For the first time in years, Richard found himself waking up without dread. He would rise early, not to scan headlines or check financial reports, but to pour Chloe's orange juice, to ask Maya how she slept, to sit at the table long enough to be present not just physically, but actually there. "Daddy," Chloe said one morning over oatmeal, "what did you want to be when you were little?" Richard blinked. "A pilot." Chloe gasped. "Really?" He smiled. "I wanted to fly, like really fly. But then I got older, and flying became meetings." Maya chuckled, sipping her tea. "That's the saddest sentence I've ever heard." He looked at her. "What about you? What did you want?" "I wanted to build things. Houses, spaces where people could breathe easy." Chloe's face lit up. "You do that? You made this house safe." Maya smiled softly. "Maybe not with bricks, but I suppose I built something." Richard nodded. "You didn't just build it. You held it up when I was too lost to try." Maya looked away, touched but guarded. Compliments still felt foreign on her skin. Later that week, a letter arrived from the board. Not a formal document, this one was handwritten. Maya opened it cautiously, sitting by the window as the fire cracked nearby. It was from Miriam Ashcroft. "Miss William, I was wrong about you. Not just in assumption, but in the quiet ways we measure value. I've sat on this board for 27 years, and never once have I seen such clarity in a testimony. Thank you for speaking when silence would have been easier. Sincerely, M. Ashcroft." Maya folded the letter gently, her hands trembling just slightly. She tucked it away not because she needed proof, but because sometimes acknowledgement mattered more than apology. One evening, while Chloe was building a Lego tower taller than her head, Maya and Richard sat by the fire, sipping bourbon. It had become a small tradition, half an hour of calm after bedtime. "I've been thinking about school," Richard said. "For Chloe?" He nodded. "She's ready, but not just for any school. I want one that sees her for who she is, not just who she can perform as." Maya nodded. "That's a rare place. I thought maybe we could look together. You know her better than anyone." Maya hesitated. "You trust me with that?" "I trust you with her, and that's bigger." He looked down at the fire, then back at her. "I was also thinking about you." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Would you ever want to study again? Architecture, maybe? Or design?" She blinked, caught off guard. That was a dream from another life. "Why not bring it into this one?" Maya smiled faintly. "Because I'm busy keeping this house from falling apart." He shook his head. "This house isn't falling. It's finally standing." She studied him for a moment. "I'll think about it." The next day, while Chloe was at a speech therapy session with Claire, Maya wandered into the old study, the one Evelyn used to keep locked. Richard had left it open that morning, inviting her in with just a look. Inside, dust still clung to some of the shelves, but light streamed through the tall windows, painting golden patches across the worn rug. A thick folder lay on the desk, labeled simply, "Evelyn's Notes." Maya opened it gently. Inside were pages of letters Evelyn had written, some to Richard, others to Chloe, and a few to someone unnamed. But one note caught Maya's eye. "If you're reading this, it means you've chosen to stay. Thank you. Not everyone sees the invisible, children. Not everyone waits. But you did. You saw her. You listened. That's a kind of love I prayed she'd find, even if I couldn't stay long enough to give it myself. With all the gratitude I never got to say." "Evelyn." Maya's eyes blurred. She closed the folder, holding it close to her chest. "Sometimes, the deepest love came from people you never met but who somehow knew you would arrive." That night, Chloe crawled into Maya's bed after a nightmare. Her small hands were cold, her voice trembling. "Will you leave?" she whispered. Maya pulled her close. "Never, not unless you tell me to. Even when I'm big?" Even then. Outside the window, the snow had begun again, quiet and steady. And inside, wrapped in warmth and promises, Chloe finally fell asleep. Winter finally began to loosen its grip. but it left behind a kind of quiet that lingered in the hallways. The days stretched a little longer now, light creeping into corners that had stayed dark for too long. It was subtle, but Maya could feel it. Change was coming. One morning, Richard found her in the greenhouse, repotting a row of withered succulents. Her hands were covered in soil, her brow furrowed as she coaxed life from things that had nearly given up. "You do that a lot," he said, leaning in the doorway. She looked up, amused. "Play with dirt?" "No," he said. "Bring things back." Maya smiled, brushing her hands on her apron. "Everything just needs the right kind of light." He stepped in, careful not to bump the clay pots. "I got an email from a school in Vermont. A speech and sensory development center. Progressive. Small classes. Personalized plans." Maya raised an eyebrow. "You thinking of sending Chloe across the country?" "I'm asking what you think," he replied. "It's a big move, but I'm also realizing, this house, this life, it can't be the end of her world. She needs to stretch." Maya nodded slowly. "She's brave enough. She just doesn't know it yet." Richard looked down. "I want her to fly, but I don't want her to feel like I'm pushing her off a cliff." Maya chuckled. "Then you better make sure you're the net under her feet." They stood in silence for a moment, until Maya said softly, "Would I go with her?" He met her eyes. "Would you want to?" Maya didn't answer. "Not yet." That afternoon, Chloe surprised everyone by reciting a full poem she had memorized unprompted, clear, almost proud. It wasn't long or fancy, just 4 lines from a children's book, but it came out of her like sunlight through open windows. Richard sat frozen, eyes wide, his coffee growing cold. Maya pressed her hand to her mouth, trying not to sob. Claire clapped from the kitchen, her hands shaking. "Do you know what this means?" Richard asked softly. Chloe just grinned. "It means I have magic now." And in that moment, no one in the house doubted it. The next evening, Maya stood in front of the mirror in her room, holding up a navy blue dress she hadn't worn in years. She hadn't needed to, but something inside her told her it was time. She slipped it on, fixed her hair, and walked downstairs. Richard was reading in the music room, but when he saw her, the words slipped from his hands. "Going somewhere?" he asked, surprised. Maya shrugged. "I thought I might take myself out. Somewhere nice, somewhere adult." He smiled. "You deserve that." She tilted her head. "You could come with me." It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't a test. It was an invitation. He hesitated only for a moment. "I'll grab my coat." They ended up at a small Italian restaurant downtown, tucked between a bookstore and a bakery. The lighting was dim, the booths high-backed and warm, and the smell of garlic and wine wrapped around them like a familiar embrace. They talked about everything: Chloe, Evelyn, Vermont, the foundation, dreams long buried. Maya told him about the house she'd always wanted to design, a community center with stained glass windows and reading nooks in every hallway. Richard told her about the plane he never flew, and how, sometimes, he still looked up when one passed overhead. At some point, the conversation fell away, and they just sat in silence. But it wasn't the kind that fills empty space. It was the kind that means something. "I thought love was supposed to be louder," Richard said, almost to himself. Maya looked at him. "Sometimes, the loudest kind is the one that waits." He nodded slowly. "I think I've spent my whole life chasing the wrong kind of noise." When they returned to the estate, Chloe was already asleep, curled under a patchwork quilt Claire had stitched together from old t-shirts and worn flannel. Maya leaned in to kiss her forehead, brushing a curl from her cheek. "She didn't wake once," Claire whispered. "Not even when the wind picked up." Maya smiled. "She's safe now." Back in the hallway, Richard stood beside the listening tree ornament Chloe had hung near the fireplace. He touched it gently. "She told me the tree listens because it doesn't talk back." "She's wiser than both of us," Maya said. He turned to her. "You know what I was thinking during dinner?" "What?" "That this doesn't have to end when she leaves." Maya stilled. "You mean Vermont?" He nodded. "I mean you. Me. This, whatever this island." Maya's heart beat hard against her ribs. She had waited years to hear something like that, but now, standing in the quiet house she once slept on the floor in, it felt almost too big to hold. "You're not just saying that because you're afraid of letting go?" I'm saying it because I don't want to lose the one thing that made all of this mean something. Maya breathed in. Let's not name it yet. Let's just keep showing up. He nodded. Every day? Every day. And for the first time since Evelyn died, the house didn't feel haunted by the past. It felt filled with a future neither of them had expected but both had begun to believe in. Spring came late to Vermont. Chloe had been attending the Progressive Learning Center for a little over a month now. The school sat nestled on the edge of a pine-covered hill, its red barn-style buildings softened by age and wildflowers. The air smelled of damp earth and new beginnings. It was the kind of place Evelyn might have chosen herself. Maya thought gentle, honest, and full of space to grow. Every Friday, Maya and Richard visited, not because the school required it, but because Chloe asked. She says Fridays are brave days, one of her teachers explained. It's when she tries something new. Today, it was reading aloud. They sat in the back of the classroom as Chloe stood at the front, hands tucked behind her back, a book pressed against her chest. Her voice was shy but steady, each word carefully released, like a small bird testing its wings. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, not wild, but sincere. Chloe blushed, looking directly at Maya. I did it, she whispered. You did more than that, Maya said. You flew. Back at the rented cottage, Maya unpacked groceries while Richard worked at the breakfast nook, reviewing blueprints and emails from the foundation. Chloe napped on the couch, a trail of crayon drawings scattered across the floor like breadcrumbs to her dreams. Do you ever miss the house? Maya asked, not looking up. Richard didn't answer immediately. He leaned back, stretching. Sometimes, but not the way I thought I would. I miss Evelyn's garden, the old piano. I miss knowing where every creaky floorboard island. He glanced over at Maya. But I don't miss the emptiness. Maya nodded. This place is small. It's alive, he said. She smiled at that. That weekend, they drove into town for the farmer's market. Chloe ran ahead, pointing at honey jars and bouquets of tulips. Maya held her hand loosely, letting her wander just enough to feel free. Do you think she remembers the worst of it? Maya asked. Richard, standing beside her with a coffee in hand, followed her gaze. I think kids remember feelings more than facts, he said. She might not remember what I did, but she'll remember what you were. Maya blinked. What I was? The calm, the softness, the waiting. She looked away, emotion climbing up her throat. You know, he added, I've been thinking about that community center you wanted to build. Mine? She turned toward him, curious. There's land for sale, near the school. Nothing fancy, but enough. Maya's breath caught. You're serious? I'm not just serious. I'm all in. I've seen what happens when people have a place to be safe. Maya stared at him. You want to build it with me? I want to build it for you. And if you'll let me, with you too. By mid-April, plans were already in motion. Claire flew out to visit, holding Chloe so tight it took both Richard and Maya to peel her off. She's taller, Claire said, dabbing her eyes. And her words have rhythm now. She's making up for lost time, Maya whispered. One evening, while Chloe colored in the yard, Richard and Maya sat on the porch with glasses of wine. The Vermont sky was dusky pink, and the birds had returned. I never thought it would be here, Richard said. I always imagined healing would look like going back, fixing what was broken. Maya shook her head. Healing isn't about fixing. It's about building new. He looked at her. Then this, us, it's real? Maya didn't hesitate. It's the most real thing I've ever known. There was no kiss, no sweeping music, just a hand finding another across a small porch table. Fingers entwined, steady, certain. The groundbreaking ceremony for the community center happened in early June. They named it the Listening Place, Chloe's idea. A plaque was mounted near the entrance, built in honor of all the voices we almost never heard. Maya William, Richard Sterling. As the first brick was laid, Chloe clapped wildly. Maya stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder. And Richard, his heart full in a way he never thought possible, whispered, We're not just healing anymore. We're leading. Maya finished. Later that night, after the speeches and photos and hugs, Chloe tugged on Maya's dress. Does this mean we're a forever family now? Maya knelt down. We've always been. Chloe looked up at Richard. Even Daddy? He smiled. Especially Daddy. And for the first time since her mother died, Chloe looked at her home not as something broken or borrowed, but as something built. By love, by time, by choosing. over and over again. To stay. By the time summer settled in, the listening place had begun to take shape not just with bricks and beams, but with stories. Each week, new families stopped by to ask when it would open. A retired veteran offered to donate books. A single mother asked if she could help paint the mural. A boy with a stutter asked if there would be music rooms. Maya wrote every name down in a notebook she kept tucked in her bag, next to Chloe's drawing of the white bird. "I don't want to forget anyone," she told Richard. "You won't," he said. "You never do." Inside the cottage, life was quieter now, but fuller. Chloe had a rhythm school, art, play, rest. Her words came smoother, sometimes in bursts, sometimes in careful whispers. She'd started writing little notes and leaving them around the house like secrets waiting to be found. On Richard's desk, "You're a good dad, even when you don't know how." On Maya's pillow, "You make the air soft." They kept every note. One evening, Maya was sorting through storage bins in the attic when she stumbled upon a box marked "Sterling Family, Private." She hesitated, but something told her to open it. Inside were old photographs. Evelyn as a girl, Richard as a gangly teenager, Chloe as a newborn swaddled in blue. But tucked at the bottom was a sealed envelope with Maya's name on it written in Evelyn's looping cursive. She sat on the floor and opened it with shaking hands. "Maya, if this letter finds you, it means you stayed. And for that, I thank you in 1,000 ways I'll never get to say in person. I always believed love is less about grand gestures and more about daily faith. You've proven that, not just to Chloe, but to Richard. If he's still trying to figure things out, be patient with him. He's not broken, he just needed someone to show him how to hold the pieces. This family, it's yours too now, if you'll have it. Love, Evelyn." Maya sat with the letter for a long time. Then, gently, she placed it back in the box alongside a photo of Evelyn holding Chloe, the white bird mobile in the background. Some legacies aren't written in money or marble. Some are passed from mother to mother, in quiet trust. The next morning, Maya joined Richard on the porch. He handed her coffee without a word. "You're thinking again," she said. He smirked. "Is it that obvious?" She nodded. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I've been asked to return to the foundation full-time. They want me to chair the Family Impact Board." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a mouthful." "It is," he said. "But it's good work. Policy, advocacy. Making sure the money actually reaches the people. That sounds like something Evelyn would have supported. She would have pushed for it." Maya looked at him. "So what's stopping you?" He hesitated. "I don't want to leave this. You, Chloe, Vermont." "No, you're not leaving anything," she said. "You're expanding it." He looked up. "You built this family by choosing to show up every day," she said. "Now it's time to show up for others too." He reached over, took her hand. "And you?" She smiled. "I'll still be here, drawing blueprints, picking out paint swatches, letting Chloe teach me which butterflies are friend-shaped and which are too flappy." He laughed. "You make everything sound manageable." "That's what we do," she said. "We make the impossible livable." The grand opening of the listening place came on a golden afternoon in early September. Families gathered under the bunting. There were cookies and lemonade, and children chasing bubbles through the yard. Chloe stood at the ribbon, holding a pair of scissors almost too big for her hands. Maya knelt beside her. "You ready?" Chloe looked out at the crowd, then back at her. "I was born ready," she whispered. And with that, the ribbon fell. Inside, every room was full. Books lined the shelves. Cushions in quiet corners invited people to sit. A community wall displayed handprints from every volunteer. In one of the reading rooms, Richard stood beside a woman holding her toddler. "My son doesn't talk much," the woman said. "Sometimes I worry he never will." Richard glanced at Maya, who was crouched near the window, helping a girl find the picture book with the rainbow duck. He smiled softly. "Sometimes, silence is just the beginning of something remarkable." That night, after the guests left and Chloe had fallen asleep mid-story with a cookie still in her hand, Maya and Richard sat on the steps of the center, watching the stars. "You remember when this all started?" he asked. "When I thought you were hurting her." "I remember the slap," Maya said plainly. He flinched. "I'll never forgive myself for that." "You don't have to," she replied. "You already changed. That's the apology that matters." He turned toward her. "I love you." Maya looked at him, calm and sure. I know, and I love you too. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't sudden. It was earned. It was daily. And as the wind rustled through the trees above them, the night carried that love gently into the world they'd built from the ashes. October arrived wearing gold. The Vermont trees were on fire with color amber, crimson, orange so bright it looked lit from within. Chloe took to collecting the leaves each morning before school, pressing them between wax paper sheets with Maya. They made a collage above her bed titled Things That Fall But Still Shine. Richard, meanwhile, split his time between foundation work in the city and home in Vermont. He never stayed away more than 2 nights. The house was different without him. Quieter, slower but not lonely, because the silence was now full. One Friday afternoon, Maya received an envelope in the mail addressed in careful handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside was a single page and an old photograph, black and white, worn at the edges. A woman with dark eyes and a wide, unguarded smile held a baby with a birthmark just like Maya's. The letter read, "To Maya William, you don't know me, but I knew your mother, Delilah. She was kind, brave. She helped me escape something terrible, once risked her own job to protect me. After she passed, I moved, lost touch, but I always wondered what happened to her little girl. When I read about the community center and saw your name, I knew. You built the kind of place she always dreamed of. I thought you should know. Monica Hill." Maya stared at the letter for a long time. Then she cried, not from grief, but from recognition. Somewhere, a piece of her had just clicked into place. That evening, she found Richard sitting in the study, reading one of Chloe's leaf-labeled books. She handed him the letter, said nothing. He read it, slowly, then looked up. "Your mother. She gave away her safety to protect someone else." Maya nodded, eyes misty. He reached for her hand. "Now you're the safe place." In the weeks that followed, the listening place began receiving more than just visitors. It became a gathering ground, grief groups, single dads, veterans looking to relearn parenting. And more than once, Maya was asked to speak publicly about how it came to be. The first time she stood at a podium, her hands trembled, not from fear of the crowd but from the weight of what she now represented. She glanced to the side of the stage. Chloe gave her a thumbs up, mouth full of granola bar. Richard smiled, arms folded, steady as stone. And Maya began, "I came into this family not through blood or birthright, but through presence," she said, "through listening, through waiting." She told the story not as a savior, but as a witness, not as someone who rescued, but someone who refused to leave. And when she finished, the applause was not loud but long. That night, back at the cottage, Chloe crawled onto the couch beside Maya. "You're famous now," she whispered, giggling. "Hardly. You help people feel like they can belong." "And is still..." Maya brushed a strand of hair from Chloe's cheek. "Do you feel like you belong?" Chloe didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. "Yes, even on the days I'm quiet, even when I forget words." "That's what love is," Maya said softly. "Not loud, just constant." Richard returned from the city 1 week later with a surprise. A leather-bound folder, blueprints, a second listening place. "I want to build one in Evelyn's name," he said, "in the city. A legacy not just for her, but for this, for us." Maya looked through the designs. "You're serious?" He nodded. "You made me serious." Her voice caught. "I thought this was just a chapter." He touched her cheek. "This is the story." Later that night, as Chloe slept and the fire crackled low, Maya and Richard sat in silence on the couch, fingers laced, her head resting on his shoulder. She whispered, "Do you ever wonder how it all could have gone? If that day hadn't happened? If you'd never seen me touching her throat?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, I'd still be alone, and she'd still be silent." Maya closed her eyes, "And I'd still be sleeping on someone else's floor." He pulled her closer. "We all had to break to find this, and in that moment, there was no regret. Only the quiet understanding that sometimes the path to belonging isn't built by those who speak the loudest, but by those who stay when it's hardest." Winter returned, softer than before. The Vermont sky was a pale gray quilt stretched above the listening place. Children's laughter echoed through its halls, and quiet conversations filled the corners like music. On the bulletin board near the front door, someone had pinned a new quote, Even the quietest voice can build a home. La. Maya didn't know who had written it, but she kept it there. The second listening place was nearly finished, this one in the heart of the city, where Evelyn once walked those same streets, wondering if anyone would carry on her work. They would, and it had started, not with a board meeting or a donation, but with a 5-year-old girl who hadn't said a word. On the morning of the city center's ribbon cutting, Maya stood in the mirror of her hotel room, adjusting a simple necklace, a silver bird, a gift from Richard, for the one who taught her to fly, the note had said. Chloe wore a matching one. "You nervous?" Richard asked, buttoning his cufflinks nearby. "I'm remembering," Maya said. He looked at her reflection. "Tell me." "I'm remembering that I almost quit that first week. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. You looked through me like I was disposable." He flinched. "I was broken." "You were cruel," she said, gently but firmly. "But so was the world that made you believe love should only look one way." He nodded slowly. "And you changed that." She turned. "We changed that." The city center was buzzing. Press, volunteers, families, donors. But the chaos faded the moment Chloe stepped up to the microphone. She was 10 now. Taller, bolder, with a voice full of sunshine and soft steel. "This place is for anyone who was ever told they were too quiet, too small, too strange," she said clearly. "This place is for people who need someone to stay." The audience held its breath. Then applause broke thunderous, rising like wind through a canyon. Maya blinked back tears. Richard placed a hand over hers. After the ceremony, as crowds thinned and light faded, Chloe stood by the plaque near the entrance. It read, "In memory of Evelyn Sterling, in honor of Maya William, for teaching us that justice isn't loud, it's loyal, and that family is who stands beside you when everyone else walks away." Chloe touched the metal gently, then looked up at Maya. "Can we go home now?" Maya nodded. "Yes, baby, let's go home." Back in Vermont, the air was crisp, and the trees had shed most of their color. That night, the three of them sat on the back porch, wrapped in blankets, sipping cider. Claire had come up for the weekend and was making pecan pie inside. Singing off-key, Chloe lay curled between them, drowsy but smiling. "Are we going to keep building these places forever?" she asked. Richard looked down at her. "Do you want us to?" She nodded. "Because there's always someone waiting." Maya kissed her forehead. "Then we'll keep building." They watched the stars appear, one by one, blinking into the wide silence. Later, when Chloe was asleep, Maya walked through the house, stopping at the framed photos on the wall. One was new. It was a picture of Maya, Chloe, and Richard standing in front of the city listening place. Behind them was a mural of a white bird taking flight. Maya traced her fingers over it, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe it. This wasn't just healing. It was becoming. It was the life her mother dreamed of. The one Evelyn prayed for. The one Chloe made possible. And as Maya turned off the lights and climbed into bed beside the man who once called her a mistake, she whispered to the dark, "Thank you for choosing me. Because sometimes, family is found in the wreckage. Sometimes, love speaks through silence. And sometimes, the truest stories are the ones we almost didn't survive." This story reminds us that the greatest transformations often begin in the quietest places through patience, compassion, and the courage to stay when it's easiest to walk away. Maya's journey teaches us that healing doesn't always come with grand gestures, but through consistent presence, quiet strength, and unwavering love. In a world quick to judge by status, color, or power, her dignity in the face of cruelty becomes a quiet form of justice. Richard's redemption shows that it's never too late to change, that even those blinded by grief and pride can learn to listen, love, and build again. And Chloe, the silent child, becomes a symbol of all the unheard voices that deserve to be seen not just for what they lack, but for what they can grow into, if given the chance. The story is not just about a black maid and a billionaire. It's about the power of staying, the justice of compassion, and how family isn't always who you're born to, but who chooses to stand beside you when the world turns away.